I'm Chris Hanna,
Jordan Silvester.
and here we are in a studio. We have been building this studio for some time now,
Yes.
and it has been a fun experience, but a challenging experience.
Yeah, well, we bought everything, and we're like, okay, so we just plug everything in and hit play. No, that did not go so to plan.
But I'm so glad that we have built this.
Of course.
And yes, it's costed more than we probably expected. There's always little things that you have to pick up and buy.
Yep.
But this is such a cool space to be able to record short form, long form content. And I can't believe how much I've learned through this process.
Well, and that's, so I'm an investor by my trade, right, in real estate. So the first investment you usually ever do, you're like, oh man, I should have done this, or oh, I should have bought that. So again, if we ever rebuild the studio or do anything like this again, we have new information. It's like, okay, so we have all this stuff, but what are the things we're not thinking about? And so again, when I first came in, it's like, okay, I've got all these cables. How am I going to get them places? Because it's like, you just have cables everywhere. So you had to go back and buy those things. We had to buy all the two-sided tape. We tried one thing, it didn't work. Everything fell off, right? It's funny because it's like, okay, so just buy this. Like, it's spend that extra few bucks up front. And a lot of times it saves you in the long run, right? Simply as the recorder, which is recording all of our cameras simultaneously versus only recording to the one camera. Like that for $100 at the time when you were buying it, you probably didn't even realize, like, oh, not a big deal. We'll just change the camera. And then you're actually in real time doing this. You're like, this is insane. To be able to have it all recorded so you have all of the content is a cool thing. Because like you said, we've got all the angles, all the stuff going on.
Yeah, like I did so much research trying to come up with, what do we need? I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I reached out to people who have built studios, and you get advice and you build out, I'll call it a shopping list.
Sure.
We get the shopping list, we buy everything. Then we kind of didn't do anything for a bit with it.
Yep.
But then once we decided we were going to start, putting it all together, I'm like, this won't be too bad. I think you were like in a meeting somewhere, and I'm like, I'm coming in. I'm just going to start setting everything up.
Yep. Unbox
everything. Couldn't believe the amount of boxes and stuff that there was, because it was like, whoa, this is actually deceiving. Like how much we have, because we have a 4-person setup.
Yep.
And we've got all this equipment, and I was like, this is great. We're able to plug everything in. I'll be able to plug it into some software. We'll be able to use that software. Be great. We're good to go.
Yep.
I don't know how many sessions we have done where we have recorded, tested. Oh, don't like this, don't like that. Oh, audio's off. Oh, it's a little blurry here. Like, it's been so much troubleshooting.
Yep.
But I'm actually so thankful we did it.
Well, because now we have the knowledge of, okay, so here's all the areas where it can go wrong. Like, if you don't, like, here's the thing. If we went into it being like, oh, this will be easy, which to an extent we were at 98%, as we've joked about forever.
That's right.
It's like you're on the, I don't know, for all of you who may not be old enough to know this, but when you were doing updates back in the days of dial-up internet, and you'd get to like 98% of a song and then it'd error and have to restart from the beginning. Like, we didn't have to go all the way back to the beginning, but it did feel like every time we were like error message, and you're like, come on, man. Like, we're right there. Like, the song's going to play in just a second. And I believe we might have actually done it, which is cool. We're actually that last 2%, but it was interesting because we were able to still use the studio. Like, I've done a lot with the studio in the meantime, using it as it was. We weren't able to do exactly what we wanted, which is fine, but we accommodated and done other things.
Yeah. So like, I think some of the major challenges that like I struggled with was the quality, because to me, I think quality is so important, and maybe I'm a little biased because obviously like the video work is what I do.
Yep.
And so there were times where we're like, I think it's good enough. I could never get comfortable with the idea of good enough.
Right.
I was like, okay, we did an entire 1 hour and 6-minute podcast episode.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, in the moment, looked at it, looks good. I'm trying to edit it. And I was like, I wouldn't use this footage.
Right.
And I think that there is this balance between like, okay, quality and then like really high quality. But to me, it was important that we had the mix of like, I had a better quality than what we were needing. So we kept saying, yes, 98%.
Yep.
But we are now at that 100%. I'm glad we've gotten there. It's been a journey.
Yep.
But it comes down to, I think, having the right tools.
Yeah.
And trying to continue to figure it out. And so we've got like a great facility now, being able to record content. You've recorded a lot just personally.
Yep.
And we find ways to use the studio in a different way. And I don't know if you want to talk about that in terms of like the book side of it.
Yeah.
But like
transcripts.
But it's been pretty cool for you to be able to leverage it while we haven't had it fully operational from what the original purpose was.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned in life, is things aren't going to go exactly as you expect. So it's like, okay, so this project, like I've been wanting to write a book for a long time. But once we started to use the system, even though the video wasn't working, there was stuff that because we were creating content and doing some other things, that appeared, and I went, oh, there's show notes, and these are really cool. And I'm like, oh wow, it really understood what I was trying to get across. It was using AI and other things. So then I asked you, I went, hey, do you think if I were to actually like try to write a book and pull the transcript and do this stuff, would it work? And you're like, I don't see why not. I've never thought about doing it that way. And of course, I'm almost done writing the book using that system, but that's what I've done with it for the last month. And again, even though the podcast we did may never come out in video, it is audio.
That's right.
We could do so. The audio was actually the first thing we had to fix because we didn't have the cables long enough. We had to buy the extenders. We had some issues with getting all that working. Finally, that was working. We didn't realize the cameras weren't working as well. And so it's interesting because each phase we've gone through to the point where we are now has brought about a different understanding of what we can do with the system as it is, and then what we'll be capable of doing when it gets to its final product. And if we never did have that glitch, the book probably doesn't exist because I would have just gone straight into the podcasts. And I would have been so busy with the podcasts that I wouldn't have bothered to slow down to do the book. But so sometimes, as funny as it is, sometimes delays or things that don't work out exactly as planned are for a different purpose.
Yeah, I think another big lesson that we kind of you touched on, which I want to elaborate on, is that so we bought a video switcher when we first started, and it was about $400 or $500. And I was like, yeah, this will be perfect, exactly what we kind of need. We can plug in 4 cameras, be awesome.
Yep.
And then as we were talking through it, I'm like, oh, I got to manually press the buttons to switch between cameras if we're live producing something.
Yep.
Well, that's a pain in the ass.
Yep.
And so through another conversation with somebody else that we had, that we realized there's another version that we should get.
Right.
Sure, it's going to cost another $300-$400 or whatever, but all cameras get recorded at once.
Yep.
What a game changer.
Right.
But it's like, I think it's a good lesson to like, if you're going to get something, sometimes you're going to have to spend some money to really get the true value and convenience. Like I had to look at like, what's the value of my time to sit there and try and be manually pressing buttons
Yep.
and being there all the time? It makes no sense.
Yep.
But I'm like, oh, okay, fine. We're going to spend more money, get the next version.
Yep.
Worthwhile investment.
Well, again, I look at this. So again, as a renovator, I rebuilt a home. And one of the things that I learned was when I had real professionals come in with the real tools that they used versus me like scrambling around with the tools I had to make something work. So having the perfect tool, which is what we have now, saves so much time because you're like, oh, you have a proper blade that doesn't do this thing to this wood that, you know, in this scenario, it cuts 90% of the wood fine, but this, it doesn't work because of that. When I realized that, okay, so buying that right tool saves you time.
Yeah.
The problem was that tool is like $300. But I'm like, okay, but I spent how many hours of my life trying to make this other tool work? And that's why when we first talked about it, I'm like, no, like, okay, so if we do it this way, how much editing work is it for you to try to do this? You're like, well, I have to be here the whole time somebody's in studio recording like we are now. Whereas now, if I hit record on that with another person, all the content's being recorded simultaneously in all the streams. And then you're just editing from there. And I'm like, yeah, that's worth every dime. Because even though for a minute, oh, I've paid this extra money, but in the years to come, every dime is well spent.
Yeah, and I think this is important to kind of look at, like, how much do you value your time? Like,
Yep.
I care about my time. Like, yeah, there's a $400, difference between products. But yeah, we had to buy a whole brand new device.
Yep.
But to me, it's like, it's an easy decision to make.
Of course.
It's going to save me so much time and gives me so much more options.
Yep.
Like, as we're watching this now, anyone who sees this, like, we've got one camera, obviously it's looking at me.
Over there.
We've got one camera that's looking directly at Jordan.
Yep. Hey, everybody.
Right? There is another camera, which is kind of giving both of us in the same shot.
Right there.
And then we've got another camera that's up high.
Up high.
So to have the different perspectives gives us so much more flexibility.
Yep.
But we've built a studio in a way where we can move the cameras around to different spots if we need to. There is flexibility.
Yeah. One of the things, because again, so a lot of content that I create is solo. So I do a lot of things where I'm talking to the screen. I've got some different projects I'm working on where it's just me. So you need it set up a certain way. And then there's this project where, again, the purpose of the whole studio was not just that, because I could do some of that from home, but was the ability to have a guest live. Because for me, one of the things I like about this studio is that you're sitting there, not on the screen. Mm-hmm. We have capacity, which is a cool thing because of the other cameras, to actually bring somebody in virtually if we want to. And we also have the other 2 spots at the table. Again, I think it's interesting as you keep building, right? We like angles. We spent part of this morning was figuring out if I reach out here, I'm in your camera now, right? And so again, where do I have to be? How do I stay out of the lines? And learning, okay, so if we're in this studio, right, my hands out front, like all these little things that you're like, oh, I didn't even think about it, because again, it's live stream. It's grabbing both, and you can edit, like you mentioned, some of it out, but figuring all those like angles out, it's all these different things you don't think about when you're just drawing it on a thing. You're not actually putting a human being actively working with it. No different than we still have one last piece, which allows us to switch cameras from where we're sitting.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and what's cool about it is as you build, you keep seeing the little pieces, and again, depending on your budget, you're able to, build at your budget. So if you have to do it differently for a time, then you do. But if you have I will tell you, if you have the opportunity to spend money that will save you in time, you should spend it today and not wait for tomorrow. Because if you spend all that, you're going to get used to the bad habit, and B, you're going to spend a lot more over 2 years, like that, the one device. If we spent $400 that will be paid off probably in the first month of operation
Easily.
versus the 2 years we would have spent. How many, like, so 12 times 4 is a lot at $4,800.
I'm a big believer that like the only reason businesses exist really are to save you time.
Right.
Right. At the end of the day, like you have to also spend money to make money, but to gain time back more than
Yep.
everything else. In my world completely changed when I decided I can't be doing all the editing myself. I need to hire an editor.
Yep.
I was able to gain more time back, get capacity so I could put it towards other things.
Yep.
I would have not been able to have done all the troubleshooting and everything that we've been doing these last months if I didn't hire an editor to help
Right.
me. Because
Yep.
I'd be sitting there editing all the hundreds and hundreds of videos that I do each and every month.
Right.
So it's like you have to be able to spend and invest. And like I guess the way I look at what we've done here together is that it's an investment.
Yes.
It's an investment, obviously, in like what we're doing, but also in how other people will be able to leverage this.
Yep.
Because content, and maybe we can touch on this a little bit here, is that like content can be such a powerful way to help more people.
Well, here's the thing. So everybody has a story. My story, your story, and we have our life experiences. You can either learn from the things that went well for me. You're more likely to learn from the stories that didn't. And the reason that is we learn a lot more through the trials that don't work. That's the same thing. We figured out that we needed to upgrade cameras. We just did. We figured out at the end of it, just like we upgraded that one thing, we upgraded cameras. Why? Because when we zoomed digitally, there was a problem. So we have to zoom. The only way to do that was to change to cameras that had a more true zoom that was done manually. And so what's interesting about that is of course, did we know that when we bought the first set of? No. If we knew that, we wouldn't have done it the other way. And again, every setup's different. So when what I look at is I don't look at it and be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we wasted this money. Because if we hadn't started, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere. I'm glad we started and we ran into problems and that we were able to overcome those problems by adapting this room and the things in it to allow us to grow. Because if we had just stopped and said, well, this doesn't work, it's crap, and then just shut down, we got so far and just stopped. It's like, okay, no, invest the last little bit.
I think that so many people actually do that, right? They'll buy something, they'll start, and then they stop. They give up. Right. Like the big stat in the podcast world is that most people don't get past 20 episodes.
Right.
And it's very, very rare to get past 100 episodes.
Right.
Everybody gives up.
Yep.
The thing is, you have to keep going even when you don't see the initial results.
Right.
I call it a long-term game.
Yes. But
Like,
anything worth doing generally is.
Yeah, it takes time, but you have to continue to put in the effort. And it's so much more fulfilling, I think, the fact that we have done this and we've kind of struggled a little bit. There's times where we've been recording and then I'm like, shit, the mic is not on.
Yes.
Or I can't hear the headset, or something's kind of gone wrong. Or
that might be my favorite.
There's definitely some clips that we have.
Is that plugged in?
Like, yeah, that's not even plugged in. So like there's some good lessons that have been learned, but I think that's the important piece I just want to kind of say. So for anybody who is watching this, you can rent this space. There's both audio and video components available. There is the ability, if you want to do virtually, have somebody come in. We've got a TV up in the one corner, which we'll put on the edit here. But it's an opportunity for people to share their message and share their story, because everybody has a story.
Yep.
And it's worth sharing.
Exactly. Yeah, the content, the benefit of why I started this process wasn't just for me to be able to do content, it's for others. Because I think once I show them, like, here, it's just this, turn these things on, do this thing, you're able to then create your own content. And then again, if you want to get to the level that I'm doing it at, I have a person, his name's Chris Hanna, who supports me. But one of the cool parts about that is it gives you great opportunity to try and do something you didn't think was possible. And if you don't like it, you can stop. But again, who's going to build the studio to not want to do it 6 weeks later? And I think that's where most people get stuck. Whereas for me, I'll be honest, we didn't build the studio right away. It became an idea once I did the podcast and did it in my own home. So all the podcasts you'll have seen of me are all sitting in my own basement with a little bit of a simpler setup, right? And then we've done this setup because I really liked doing the podcast and I thought it was a great way to reach the world. So then I wanted to do something where we had this capacity. And then what was cool about it was, in partnership with you, I knew you had clients and other people that, as we can offer it to people to help support their businesses, support their stories, support their ideas, and give them a venue where it's not complicated, it's actually simple.
The more consistently you show up, the more opportunities you position yourself to win, right? You need people to know, like, and trust you. Biggest challenge you had from your content perspective is that you would post on your birthday,
right?
And then you post again your next birthday.
Correct.
Right? And so it's continually showing up.
Once a year.
Whereas for me, like, I've been posting consistently now for, 6-7 years. So I sit there and I'll go to an event. People already know me. But now you post content.
Yep.
People know you when you go to events now too.
Correct. Yes. No, people have seen my content. People yell at me because they're like, you won't get off my Facebook page. I just smile at them. I'm like, yeah, sorry. And again, one of the cool parts about that is, again, you can either post yourself or you can get people to help you and support you. And again, one of the biggest things for me, and I'll tell you this, is if you want to manage the content, you're probably not going to post it. I said one of the things you want is someone you can trust who can post your content for you. And sometimes stuff will get out that you may not have ever wanted to be out. My favorite still is when I said I wasn't wearing pants and you couldn't see that I was wearing shorts. That one was funny. But again, when I watched it, I'm like, ah, crap, because that doesn't sound great. It sounds like I'm standing around there like in the buff.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, but it's out there. And again, you didn't do, here's the thing though, it played well. Everybody else understood, like, odds are I'm wearing clothes. Like, I was standing there in a shirt at least. But my point to you is sometimes the content that's created is good. We're so particular though, at least me personally, that I wouldn't let it out. That's why generally, if I do create my own content, I go live. Most of what I've done is live because that way I can't edit the content. And then sometimes you'll see a live that does go up and magically just disappears because I'm like, nope, gone.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So if you're getting out there though, I would recommend you not be the critic. Let somebody else watch your content, somebody you know and trust. Let them be critical, but at the same time, if they're like, yeah, no, this looks good, listen to them, trust them, because they're going to be able to have a better eye for it than you do.
Yeah, and I find, like, because of my business model that I have with all-in content, like, I can either give you the content and you can post it yourself, or I can do it all for you.
Yep.
Post it, right? The people who I give it to do it themselves struggle with consistency. Sometimes it sits in a Google Drive until I, like, poke them, like, hey, you got some videos to release. And like, oh, yeah. Right? Or they're a little critical, or they're like, they get busy.
Yep.
Because, yeah, it is tough to remember, like, oh, I got to post every single day.
Yep.
But if you can get somebody to kind of do it for you, it can make a world of difference.
Exactly.
So, again, this is a space that you'll be able to use to leverage if you are thinking of, I've always wanted to do a podcast, or I want to try it.
Yep.
You can try it without having to buy all the equipment. Instead of trying to do it yourself, instead of trying to do it from your basement and maybe not having the right mic or setup or camera, this is high quality, being able to do it, and you can do it locally.
Exactly.
All right. That's it.
See you guys.
All right. So we'll